And when it comes to application of your kata in particular, people are definitely looking to other martial arts. And I love to look at things that are being done in other martial arts and compare them to karate and find how they fit. But I can't say for the most part that I've pulled applications from them so much as I've had applications that have been taught to me already or that I've worked out for myself, and I happen to see them in other martial arts and go, hey, I already do that. Or that's very similar to a thing that I do. And I just find it, sort of a reinforcement, if you will, right? That multiple martial arts come to a similar conclusion. But there's definitely people who don't have a good source for karate applications, karate techniques from the kata, and they have to find them somewhere. And if they're finding them in those other arts, that's great as long as they're taking them back and working them. That's something that I see that is a concern as well. You'll find that there are karateka out there who will see a technique being done in another martial art, and they make the connection that, oh, that looks like this posture or this movement from this kata. And they'll acknowledge that, but they'll never actually go and train it and spar with it. So yes, they made that connection mentally, but they haven't done anything to actually be able to use it, so it is not effectively an application they can use. And that's unfortunate too. That kind of falls into the technique collector realm of things. There are a lot of karate practitioners who will go to kata application seminars and they will memorize these applications and these drills, and they'll do them exactly the way they learned them forever. They don't experiment with variation, and they don't experiment with different drills they can use to get into those situations, and they don't spar with them. They just collect them. And again, that means that those techniques aren't effectively yours. You haven't really done anything to take ownership of them. And that's really unfortunate, because if you do, I'm of the opinion that you develop a much stronger understanding of the art as a whole, right? When I teach students application, yes, I give them example techniques to work from, but I try to also explain what those techniques really are, what the concept is overall, what principles make it work, right? Because that is essentially how it breaks down. You have an overarching concept, and there are certain principles that make that concept work, and that is expressed then in different techniques. And my late sensei and I like to use the exact same example for this, and that would be arm bars, right? Arm bar is a concept because there are just dozens of ways to arm bar somebody, right? So we have the overarching concept of an arm bar. What principles make an arm bar work? Well, you generally need to have anchored the wrist in some capacity. You have to have control of the wrist. And you have to have a fulcrum point behind the elbow, right? So that you can hyperextend the elbow by pulling on the wrist or pushing on the wrist or isolating the wrist and pushing on the back. It doesn't really matter. We've got those key principles involved, right? We're going to hyperextend by placing the fulcrum behind here and controlling here. If that is how you look at an arm bar, how many arm bars can you come up with, right? But if I just say the word arm bar, most people will have one idea of what an arm bar is. A Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu person, right? They're almost always going to think of your typical on the ground, pulling back jujigatame, as judo practitioners would call it. But somebody doing Krav Maga is going to think probably of an armbar takedown, right? Where you pull on their arm and you brace behind their elbow with your forearm and you drive them to the ground. Well, those are both arm bars. It doesn't really matter what I'm using to control the wrist. It could be both hands, it could be one hand, it could be the side of my neck. I could pinch their hand up here and apply pressure to their elbow and get an arm bar. I could apply pressure to their elbow with my head and get an arm bar. Doesn't really matter, right? Those are all technique examples that all use the same principles because they're all the same concept, an armbar.